Animals possess amazing instincts. Mama was hurt by this. Bear delivered this man her dying youngster. Then he did an astonishing thing. It was time to put his fishing equipment away. Sean was on his way back home, but he had no idea what was ahead of him. Sean was so frustrated that all he wanted was to get home. The river currents were quite strong, and his lines kept getting tangled in boulders and other debris. The fishing had not gone well at all. He just wanted to get back to his cabin since it was irritating. So he decided to cut through the bushes rather than follow the normal trail. That was the scariest thing that had ever happened to him. He had hardly rounded a corner when all of a sudden there was a huge black bear in front of him. The bear was so near that he could see her breathing through her nose. He concentrated on how to react appropriately in the event of a bear encounter in order to keep his cool. Out of reflex, he lifted his arms to make himself appear larger, more menacing, less vulnerable. He didn't make a lot of noise, though, since bears could misinterpret it as an attack or a threat. She rolled onto her back and inhaled his scent. She was very, very close. Though it was unnerving, he attempted to keep in mind that a bear standing still is typically more curious than it is preparing for an attack. But then she complained as she sat down. Her cries of pain made him turn back as he had just stepped away and was about to go. At that moment, he noticed that the bear had several cuts on her side, and blood was seeping into her fur. Her front paw appeared to be hurt as well. This can escalate the risk of the situation. But rather than appearing menacing, she merely exuded defeat and misery. Sean had an idea after seeing it. He had seen a mother bear and her cub playing by the river earlier in the morning. Though he didn't bother them, it was undoubtedly the highlight of his day. Presumably, this was the same bear. But why had she been hurt? And where had the baby gone? Sean took quick action after having the thinking. He needed to confirm a feeling he had. With the bear after him, he dashed toward the river at top speed. Having a bear at your feet should have been terrifying, but for some reason, it seemed like they were cooperating. It was quite strange, not that Sean was in danger. However, Sean swiftly surveyed the river and found not a single baby bear. Abruptly, he witnessed a shadowy head emerge from the sea. He maintained his gaze fixed on the region. The bear cub's head reappeared in the same location. The water continued to wash over him, even though it appeared as though he was clinging to some rocks. It would not be possible for him to hang on much longer. It's likely that his mother bear hurt herself while attempting to save him. She went in search of assistance after realizing she wouldn't make it to him in time and discovered Sean. Sean would not stand by and watch as the bear cub drowned in front of him. However, he was aware of how powerful the streams were, having spent the earlier part of the day in the water. He was going to drown too, if he entered without planning. He required a strategy. He snatched up his fishing gear and fishing basket trap rope in a hurry. He left a large piece of rope in front of him and tied it around himself. The other end was then fastened to a tree along the river. He threw caution to the wind and dove straight into the ocean. He was underestimating the strength of the river's current in this section. Sean swam toward the rocks where he last saw the cub, using all of his strength. A less proficient swimmer would not survive, thus Sean's background as a Navy SEAL proved invaluable. He approached a few of the boulders and then hung on to find the cub's precise location. He was momentarily only able to hear the mother bear on the coast, frantically pacing back and forth, making growling and wailing noises. The mother bear was very concerned, but she was wise enough not to go near the rushing water once more. She had met this weird man by coincidence, and now all she had to hope for was to get her cub back. Sean was breathing heavily and feeling a little lost at the moment. He wasn't positive if he reached the bear cub. With the water washing over him all the time, he hoped he was getting closer. Every time he arose to breathe, it was difficult to pinpoint his whereabouts. It took him a moment to decide which way he should swim next. He was ecstatic to see the small bear's head appear directly in front of him. He would be able to reach the cub if he simply swam downstream. Just as he was about to turn around, something went wrong. The cub was washed into the river after losing his hold on the rocks. In an instant, his head vanished beneath the Black Sea. Sean leaped off and gave it his best in the water. He was most likely lost for good if he lost the small bear at that time. The bear submerged, appearing to have given up all resistance. It was not appealing. Sean followed suit, but the rope was becoming too tight. They were getting close to the rope's end. Sean had to take action right away, or it would all end. Sean grabbed the bear barely in time before his head submerged under the water once more. The young bear just lay limp in his arms, allaying his fears that it would struggle or scratch him. The rope was pushed taut as they abruptly jerked back. Sean was fortunate to have a firm hold on the cub, as he could have easily lost him back in the water. Before they were both dead tired, he had to bring them back onto the shore. But that would require him to be able to swim with both arms. He tied the infant bear with the piece of rope he had left in front of him. He was treading water and hanging onto the cub, so it took a few tries before the infant was safe. Sean could now give it his all to get them to safety. The cub's inert state was helpful to him, but it was also a major issue. He might have missed his chance to help the cub, who was in grave danger. If he got to the mother bear carrying the dead cub, what would happen? For the bear's mother, it would be tragic, but for Sean, it might be fatal. But for now, he was unable to concentrate on it. Getting them to safety had to be his only priority. It was just the adrenaline keeping him going when he could feel his own vitality dwindling. With all his strength, he swam toward the coast. The swim would have been significantly shorter if he had only needed to go to the side rather than back to where he had in. However, it didn't feel that way. The cub was heavy, and even with the rope's great assistance, he still had to put in a lot of effort. His back and arms were aflame. He was unsure of how much longer he could take, but all of a sudden, his feet made contact with the floor. He was adrift in shallow water. He was too busy trying to keep moving to notice that they were getting close. He was able to emerge from the water by picking up the cub. The mother bear was approaching them at an incredible rate of speed for such a large, wounded animal. She was moving quite quickly. All he needed to do was remove the rope from the cub before she reached them. She grabbed him and took off before he could even check on the cub. However, Sean lacked the strength to move. He just laid there gasping as he collapsed to the ground after yanking off the rope. For the remainder of the day, he couldn't fathom doing anything else that would require energy of any kind. However, there are moments when we might surprise even ourselves with our own abilities. It would not be long before he received his next challenge. He was gasping for air as he watched the sky, when all of a sudden, he heard the mother bear's now familiar groans. But now, for some reason, they sounded even more hopeless and depressed. Just as Mama Bear, who had been hurt, was returning the baby to him, he sat up. He appeared immobile and was emaciated. Surprisingly, the depressed mother didn't appear hostile. She trusted him now. After placing the infant close to him, she moved away. She seemed to realize that Sean had saved the cub from drowning in the past and was hoping he would do it again. Sean didn't, nevertheless, genuinely understand how to assist the cub. He listened, pressing his head to the cub's chest. A pulse could be heard. The news was excellent, but the cub's respiration hadn't improved. His mother had complete faith in this odd guy to save him, even though it was obvious he was dying. Sean was determined not to give up, even after everything he had gone through to preserve the cub. He followed his instincts, even though he wasn't sure what to do at the moment. He performed CPR like anyone would if they were in the same circumstance. Although he had never applied the method to an animal before, it was still preferable to doing nothing. Attempting to force air into a cub's lungs felt incredibly strange. He persisted even though it seemed like nothing was moving for a very long time. He might have spent hours giving CPR, or he might have just spent a few seconds doing it. By then, he had completely lost sense of time. All he knew was that he was becoming numb, and that his arms had completely lost feeling. But all of a sudden, the cub began to move and produce little coughing noises. It was a miracle the cub was inhaling. When the mother bear noticed the movement, she moved swiftly towards it. Her kid heard her call and responded in a feeble way. Despite his weariness, Sean made good use of what little strength remained to avoid interfering with their joyful reunion. Even though they had experienced a great deal together, these were still wild creatures. The mother twisted the infant this way and that, and he couldn't help but smile. She seemed to be examining him closely, but it also appeared as though she was reprimanding him. Sean began to wonder whether this was how his own mother would have responded. First concerned, then irate. He exposed himself to risk. It appears that all species share a mother bond. Though it was a beautiful picture, it would not stay long. They were about to have a wonderful day's conclusion when an even more startling event occurred. The mother began to stagger dangerously as she took a few steps into the forest. She turned to face Sean, who met her gaze immediately before she collapsed with a loud thud. She stayed put, even though the baby was crawling all over her. Only then, when he rushed closer to take a closer look, did Sean realize that the bloodstains on her fur had gotten significantly worse. Blood was all over her. He had underestimated the severity of the gashes. She seemed to be giving in totally now that her kid was secure and alive, as if she had simply kept going out of fear and adrenaline. Sean's lack of ideas on how to assist was the only issue. Her thick fur made it difficult for him to tell where the wounds were, so he was still wary of getting too close to her. She had already lost so much, even if he could halt the flow. She would require far more attention than he was capable of giving. Sean found it hard to believe. He had rescued the cub only to see him instantly turn into an orphan. He had no phone nearby to ask for assistance. At that point, his body was cramping all over, and his cabin was too far away. He would not be able to arrive in time. It seems as though this incredible day was going to end tragically and badly. Seeing the small cub attempt to play with his mother was heartbreaking. He even appeared to be attempting to wake her at one point, but it was unsuccessful. Sean then heard something. It had a pickup truck-like sound. As soon as he let out a cry, several forest guards appeared and encircled him. When he was rescuing the cub in the river, he was spotted by a few hikers earlier. In order to contact the nearby forest rangers, they sprinted till they discovered mobile service. As soon as they could, they emerged. They could work on the non-responsive mama bear fearlessly, as they had a bear-sized container with them. In an attempt to prevent her from losing any more blood, they applied some bandages to her wounds. They hurriedly packed her into the crate after that. The infant accompanied its mother voluntarily. The group then hurried the bears to the closest wildlife hospital so they could receive treatment. Thank goodness one of the rangers stayed behind to provide Sean with a ride back to his cabin. His heroic deeds would have an effect on his physique for several days. Never in his life had he been happier to skip a walk. Sean was uncomfortable, but it didn't really matter. All he could hope was that the mother bear would be helped by the clinic. Rehabilitating and releasing the infant back into the wild wouldn't be simple without her. He went to see them the following day. They let him observe the two bears within their makeshift enclosure, but not up close. The mother's large fur patches had been shaved off, and her scars were hideous. Sean was shocked that she'd managed to hang on for this long. They were also keeping the infant quiet so he could rest and heal, because he was still so frail from his ordeal. They contained the pair in a single, smaller enclosure. The infant was calm because there wasn't much space for movement. The mother faced numerous difficulties. Infection even set up at a few of the wounds. It took a lot of fighting to make her strong, but her infant was by her side the entire time. She seemed to gain the willpower to recover from that. Despite everything that this small family had to endure, they were both going to live. It was amazing. They wanted more room to spread out because the infant was getting raucous. Moving them to a larger enclosure was necessary,